Good, good morning, everyone. It's 9:15. I will call us to order and ask that we stand for a moment of silent reflection. Thank you. I would ask if any councillor has a pecuniary interest to declare. Councillor Hand.
I'm a board member of Sarnia Lambton Tourism and also Bluewater Health, so I have to excuse myself for those two discussions.
Okay, so noted with the clerk. Councillor Bean.
Thank you, Warden. Yes, I have a family member that works for Tourism Sarnia Lambton.
Okay, you've noted with the clerk. Any rise and report from our in-camera session?
Yes. Just a quick matter to report. Council met this morning for about 10 minutes in-camera session where discussing provided staff instructions on a proposed lease for facilities at 190 Front Street North in the City of Sarnia.
Thank you. We have an item that's not on the agenda. If council gives me leave to present this, I would be pleased to. We have across the country with the Raptors, and the Raptors have what they call a super fan that attends all their meetings and all their games. And I would suggest that we here in Lambton County also have a super fan, and I would like to recognize Nick Monsour today as our super fan that attends all our council meetings. So I have a little plaque here. I'm going to ask Nick to come forward. Good morning, Nick. In recognition of his many years of interest in Lambton County governance and his kind support of councillors, staff, and the community at large, we present you with and appoint you as an honorary councillor.
Thank you very much.
And we have a seat over there with a budget binder so you can sit amongst us in the circle and get a different view today.
Okay, thank you very much.
Turn around here, they're trying to take a picture. Turn this around again. You're our super fan.
Good. Can I just offer,
You certainly may.
for everyone that attends council meetings, you get a feeling that there are a lot of wonderful people working for the good of our community, for the good of our world. And I want to say this, it's a real experience to be able to come and listen to all the people who are involved, sitting at in their chairs, and the way they speak to each other and work together. And that's the key. We must all work together as one great, wonderful group of people. And I want to thank you for the donation here. This is wonderful. I'm not going to pass a collection plate around. I tried that at the city, and somebody put in 1 penny, but But anyway, thank you very much for this. This is a wonderful experience, and I didn't realize this was going to happen to me today, but I'm sure glad to be here, and God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Nick. Just have a seat up there at the table. Okay. Councillor Stark, you have a...
I'd like to acknowledge the fact that the city of Sarnia also presented Nick with a honorary councillor position on Monday evening, and he received a rousing ovation as he did here. But what's of particular interest is how many votes will Nick receive on behalf of the city of Sarnia?
We will watch them and make sure that it's all legal and above board. Certainly appreciate his support over the years. So we'll move on to our budget deliberations. Item number 7 is correspondence. We have item from the Town of Petrolia. Motion to receive and file this correspondence. Councillor Boucher, Councillor Loosley. Any questions regarding that? All in favor of that? Opposed? That's carried. Item number 8 is information reports. These are some follow-up reports that was asked for. I don't believe there's any motions associated with them. They're just for information. Councillor Arnold, you'd move receiving these for our information. Seconded by Councillor Cook. Any questions regarding any of those reports? All in favor of that? That is carried. Thank you. Item 9 is our budget deliberations. We all have our binders, and there's item A is an introduction, a memo for draft. Does anyone want to speak to this? Is there any questions regarding this? Seeing no questions, Councillor Stark.
I asked for a follow-up that resulted in this report. My question is, and I believe that this will be dealt with when we do with the requests, in the context that this provides information for that, would we simply leave it to that point before we worry about any comments as it relates to this?
I think this is just for information, but as we deal with item B, which is the grant requests, are the next item, so that's... Anyone else have any comments? Okay. Probably should have a motion to receive that for information. Councillor Stark and Councillor Loosley. All in favor of that? That's carried. Thank you. So item B on tab 2 of our binder are requests for the grant request. We deal with these individually, and I would open item A for discussion. Councillor Loosley.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Warden. I'd like to propose a resolution or a motion to bring forward, and I'll read it to you if I can. And this is in regards to, A, the request from the Town of Petrolia, that County Council approve the grant request from Victoria Playhouse Petrolia VIP, Town of Petrolia, for $200,000 annually for the next 5 years, with the money to go towards theater improvements only. And furthermore, that the money be taken out of reserve, contingency, and opportunities, or wherever staff recommends. And furthermore, that money be released upon start of construction. And if I get a seconder, I'll speak to that, Mr. Ward.
We have a seconder, Councillor Bird. Discussion. Councillor Loosley.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Ward. And through you, I just wanted to bring up a few other things that I think County Council is aware of. But I wanted to remind you that this is the only professional theater in Lambton County that attracts 40,000 plus patrons, with more than 90 buses that end up going to all the hotels in Lambton County, with a spin-off of $5 to $6 million spent throughout the county. The Council of the Town of Petrolia has unanimously approved the report from the Director of Marketing, Arts, Communication, and Co-Artistic Director dated January 13th regarding their presentation to this County Council regarding this important request. I also just wanted to mention that the county's reserves have increased by approximately $5 million to $49 million, from the $44 million, so I think there's money in reserve there. And I can't state enough how important this elevator and the additional washrooms to the theater are to attract people to the hub of the county and for the best of the theater and county of Lambton. And again, I want to make it very clear that these monies will go towards theater improvements only, which is the elevator and the washrooms. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Stark.
Yes, Mr. Warden. These are difficult discussions because they involve quality of life issues, which are important to all members of the county. The reason that I had asked for a description or a definition, an enlightenment of what other facilities in the area are doing, including the Imperial Theatre in Sarnia, it's important that all cultural events or cultural facilities are supported. However, there is a limit, and what I liked about the example of the Imperial Theatre is they explored multiple opportunities for grants, for fundraising, and it involved a $1.2 million project, which also included accessibility issues. So from my perspective, and included, as a matter of fact, a 23% funding on their own accord by way of a line of credit through a bank. So what they've done is explored alternative options in terms of funding their project. And it seems to me that Victoria Playhouse should have done, and probably is doing, those alternative methods of financing. That being the case, I will not be supporting this recommendation.
Okay. Councillor Rambaud.
Just wondering, how much has the county donated towards theater productions, things like that in the past? And also, has other projects, large infrastructure projects like this, been supported by the county in the past? For example, when Lambton Shores did their legacy center, did we donate $1 million to that? Just wondering.
Any, Mr. Meyer?
Through you, Warden, I can speak to the first part of that question just regarding support for programs, theater programs. As the council is aware, we have a Creative County grant program that is not for capital, but is rather to support new innovative projects in terms of cultural programming. We did look, because we did have this question from members of council, we did look back at our commitments to theater-related programming over the past 5 years through that Creative County Grant Program. And I'll speak more broadly about theater, not just the Victoria Playhouse. Over the past 5 years, so from 2016 forward, Creative County has supported $76,250 for the Victoria Playhouse, the Kineto, SWIFT, and the Imperial Theatre. And that was to support new programs that they delivered that did help to provide in some cases, a revenue stream that may have supported capital. However, Creative County Grant does not support capital programs. Specifically for the VPP, $33,000 over the past 5 years.
Councillor Loosely?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that the theater is looking at all other options, and I want to clarify the money requested, it's for bricks and mortars. I don't think there's ever been any money donated to the theater that I'm aware of for this, and I want to make clear that $200,000 will not pay for this. It's just a very start to a large project, so they still have a lot of money to raise yet. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? I think in the past at budget, we have, all our motions at budget meetings have been a recorded vote. And I would suggest that on these matters of grants that we do that. Councillor Boucher? Councillor
Mr.
Bird.
Warden, I'd like to support Petrolia in one way or another. I was just wondering that amount is too high as far as I'm concerned. I wonder if they have discussed finance and this item to be divided into two, where they accept $100,000 instead of $200,000.
That is not the motion that's on the floor, so I guess.
No, but I'm asking, we haven't put a motion yet.
Yeah, we have the motions for $200,000 for 5 years. And I don't know whether it's fair to ask whether they would accept half of that. That's a copy of the motion. Mr. Van Horn?
Yes, I'm sorry. There was a second part to Councillor Rombaut's question with respect to whether the county had ever supported capital projects for properties or facilities owned by local municipalities. And we've all scratched our heads. We can't remember us ever having done that. It's not a practice for this level to support infrastructure projects at the local level.
Councillor Bradley?
I think after this, there needs to be a greater discussion. Over the years, we've refined this process. We've got rid of operating requests, and we only allowed capital requests. But we've never really defined what do we wish to fund. Hospitals have been a perennial in the last 20 years. Now we're getting requests on arts and culture, but we really don't say that these are only the key things we'll even consider. And I think we need to define it because, this has become the bank of choice for a number of groups and organizations. So I think that's a greater discussion we need to do after this budget. I do want to point out, it was referenced by Councillor Stark, but the CEO of the city and I met with the Imperial Theatre last year, and they wanted to come to council, and we asked to look at their books, and we did, and they went away and never came back to us because they went back. Their books were so good that they could go and get the line of credit, which is noted in the report there. The other option, which is there, is back in the 90s, the city did give a loan to the Imperial Theatre of $800,000, which was paid back every year at $30,000. And to their credit, over the 20 years, they paid it fully back to us. And so, with all respect to Petrolia and Council and their support for this, I think you need to come back and say, we've looked at all these options. They are not functional. There was a suggestion about a lesser amount of money. There was also a suggestion about looking at a loan from the banks, from the cash flow, or maybe perhaps the county is a funder on a loan basis, if the operation is as profitable as it appears it is. And again, I come back to there are other groups that could make the same case here. So I just, with all respect, I just can't support the motion. But I do think there may be some elements there that we could work into something to assist.
Okay. Councillor Rumbout.
I believe this sets a dangerous precedent for county council. Every community here has projects similar to this that would enhance their economic development, that would enhance their towns. And I know if this goes through, we are looking at building a new recreation center, and we will be in line next year if this goes through. So I have a hard time supporting this.
Okay. Any further discussion? Motions on the floor to grant $200 per year for 5 years for capital related to the theater only. So, and I believe we will have recorded votes for these motions. So I would ask for the vote now if there's no other discussion. The randomizer goes up. Starting with Councillor Boucher.
Councillor Bradley? Councillor Broad? No. Councillor Cook? No. Councillor Ferguson? No. Councillor Hand? No. Councillor Loosely? Yes. Councillor Marriott? No. Councillor Miller? No. Councillor Napper? No. Councillor Rombouts? No. Councillor Stark? No. Councillor Veen? No. Councillor White? No. And Warden Weaver?
No.
Motion fails.
Oh, we got two more.
Oh, sorry. Jesus. Councillor Arnold? Councillor Bird? Motion fails. My apologies.
Okay. Item B is the Kiwanis Club of Forest requesting one-time funding of $75,000 to assist capital renovations in the Kineto Theatre Forest. Councillor White.
I move that we approve the Kiwanis Club of Forest request for $75,000 to assist in capital renovations to the Kineto Theatre and Forest.
Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Bird? Councillor White, you'd like to speak to the motion?
Sure. Thank you, Warden. This project I deem to be significantly different than the project before. Most notably, the dollar figure is far more modest. And in relation to a significant amount of fundraising that has already been undertaken and the commitment to continue to undertake fundraising, I think it's a reasonable request to complement the work that the Kiwanis Club is already doing in Forest. Having visited the theater, I've seen it. I understand the need tremendously, especially in terms of creating a more accessible environment. As a hub for the county, it does offer a significant amount of programming space and opportunity for nonprofit groups to deliver programming to serve the youth of that part of the county, which I think is incredibly important for us as a council to support. So I wholeheartedly support this request and ask my colleagues to consider it.
Okay. Discussion. Councillor Bradley.
Most important things in this chamber is consistency. And you just turned down a well-thought-out, well-developed proposal, not on the proposal itself, but on what our role is as a local government. And I view this as a local government responsibility, if they're interested in doing it, and a community-based responsibility. And again, consistency is everything, whether it's $75,000 or $200,000 per year. So again, and I think it's got to be really clear for all the people in this room that I know, that it is not that you're opposed to these projects or you have any negativity towards them. You simply are looking at the reality of what we're facing. And I think I know where this is going in the long term, that the grant requests to the county are going to be much more tougher to get approval from, simply because of our own pressing needs to our own citizens. So again, it's not disrespect to the application or the applicants, it's simply, it's consistency of what we're doing.
Okay. Councillor Loosely.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Warden, I also agree with that. How do you turn down one and approve the other? It's the same thing. Thank you.
Councillor Stark.
I, too, cannot support this request, but would add that I was the former president of the Seaway Kiwanis, and when I was president, there was a request by the Kineto Theatre for renovations to their facility, which were supported by Seaway Kiwanis. And Seaway Kiwanis has, since that time, generated many, many, many thousands of dollars through television bingo. So this is an opportunity for the Kineto to approach their fellow club members in other areas to support this thing, and that's where I think this should go.
Okay. Any other discussion? As with our last grant request, we will ask for a recorded vote on this. And starting with Councillor Ferguson.
Councillor Hand? Councillor Loosely? No. Councillor Marriott? No. Councillor Miller? No. Councillor Napper? No. Councillor Rombouts? No. Councillor Stark? No. Councillor Veen? No. Warden Weaver? I'm just going in order for the system.
Okay. Yep. No.
Councillor White? Councillor Arnold? No. Councillor Bird? Councillor Boucher? Councillor Bradley? No. Councillor Broad? No. Councillor Cook? Motion fails.
Okay. Item C, Bluewater Health Foundation requesting $10 million over 10 years with $1 million annually towards purchase of capital equipment. It's on page 118. Councillor Bradley.
Out to yourself and County Council on the weekend. And I don't see this as a pressing, we need to make a decision today. I think, and I'll fault myself, I should have asked more questions when they were here making their presentation. I think this needs to go back to Bluewater Health to break out the 3 projects, break out the timelines, specifically what they want from the County of Lambton, and I'll say the withdrawal management. We don't know the location, and you and I will be at a meeting next week about this with the Minister of Health. Define to us what the costs are going to be, what they already have in place, what the ministry's paying. The request is just so general, to give us $10 million, and we will apportion that as needed over the 10 years. So I think we need to send this back to them saying, can you come back with a very crisp and clear, and break out the 3 projects, and also prioritize the 3 projects, because that was not clear in the document we received. So my motion is to refer it back to Bluewater Health and to ask staff to work with them to bring a greater degree of clarification on the 3 projects, on the prioritization, what the ministry is going to pay, what does the community need to contribute, and all those key questions. So it's not a rejection, it's simply asking for more information.
And when would you want that to be brought back?
Well, my understanding is this is a levy rate issue, right? Yeah. But I'm also looking at this, unless there's something I'm missing, and knowing how the Ministry of Health operates, it's like a glacier, that I would say that we defer this to the Bluewater Health to come back, and I could see us considering it at the end of this year, going into budget for next year.
Okay.
I just don't see the urgency when we don't have a definition on when any of these projects would proceed. If that makes sense, Mr. Warden, to have it come back within the next 6 months for 2021.
With more clarification ready for budget, and it's seconded by Councillor Cook. Councillor Stark.
I wholeheartedly agree. As a matter of fact, I had a meeting with Kathy Alexander, the Executive Director, in anticipation of discussions on this issue. And to follow up with Councillor Bradley's comments, she was, and this isn't fair to characterize it as less than forthcoming, because she was very forthcoming with the fact that these are necessary projects. But I said to her, this is not an endless pit. You're coming off a request for $15 million over 10 years, and here you are a couple of years later coming back to the same well looking for more money. And I said, there is considerable downloading occurring from the province to all levels of government, and until we see the ramifications of that, not only this year but next year, we really aren't in a position to be making commitments of this size without knowing where our responsibilities at the county level are relative to the overall budgets. So I suggested to her that the $10 million request was somewhat rich, and I said to her, with all due respect, that you may want to come back to us with a little bit more of a refined request, as Councillor Bradley has indicated with this motion, and as such, I totally agree and will, in fact, support this motion.
Okay. Any other discussion? If the motion's on the floor to defer this decision till we get further clarification on how the money will be spent, basically. That's not the wording of the motion, but that's the intent of the motion. Councillor Napper.
So that won't be in this year's budget then?
No. That's,
You can still talk to it, can you? Or you defer it, I guess you do.
we hope to get the further information towards the fall and have it prepared with a breakdown for next year's grant application, I would believe. Councillor Arnold.
Warren, we members of the County Council, much knows I appreciate this motion, but if we don't want to do it this year, this is this year's budget item. Just defeat the motion, let them come back instead of taking our staff's time to figure out what they should be doing to come back to council. No offense, but they're professional people as well. And they don't need to have our staff time tied up trying to help them figure out what might work at county council. And so instead of dealing with this and sending it back another year, we're essentially defeating the motion if we support this anyways.
Okay. Councillor Napper again, follow up?
Yes, I'm having a little problem with it. We've fought for years to save our hospital in Petrolia. We've been out there and everything else, and I think this is all part of the process. And I think that'd be a setback if we pulled out our it's more or less the support that we're giving them. And it's very important to everybody across rural Ontario, the way health is going out in the rural Ontario. We supported Sarnia, Bluewater Health for that big renovations there. And I think it's important to continue on, and it gives the government the message that, yes, the municipalities are behind their small-time hospitals, and that's the only way we're going to keep them. And I'll be supporting this motion to give them the money because I think it's something everybody can use, and it's being used. We got, through our efforts, we got 9 new doctors in Petrolia, and there's a lot of good things happening, and it's got to be upgraded, and this is part of it. And yeah.
Okay. Councillor Bradley.
I don't want one side of the story to be told. This county council has been extremely generous supporting healthcare projects. And I do understand what Mayor Arnold's saying, but I prefer the motion to go forward because the reality is they'll be working with the staff anyhow, so I think it's important they see that we're being cooperative about this. And the motion that was reported out in camera without going into details, so that this county is making a significant investment in mental health issues with a grant, really, to Bluewater Health over the next 5 years. And we've done other things to support this too, and that's why, again, we're meeting with the Minister of Health, trying to move a project forward. So it's not like anyone's being negative on the healthcare system or supporting it. But the bigger issue to me is we keep on getting entrapped. There's a $900,000 hit with the Lambton health budget this year from the province. And then we're supposed to turn around and help fund what is their responsibility, healthcare. So again, I don't want anyone to think that we're not being supportive, but we're being very selective anymore, strategic on that support because of what's happening to us, because of the downloading, and because of the shifting of responsibilities.
Councillor Loosely.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Warden, and I can see both sides, but I also realize how important hospital is, and of all the things we're discussing here, except for maybe the eastern part of the county that goes to Strathroy, which we already are supporting, that I think we need to go forward with this. I think it's important, especially the town of Petrolia. The emergency department is in desperate need of repair, so I support this.
Councillor Rombo.
I think we have to be careful to remember what our mandate as county council is. I support the hospitals, absolutely. They are an essential part of our services, but county council's mandate is to support public health, which from the reports I have here, every $1 spent on immunizing children with measles, mumps, rubella, and vaccines saves $16 in healthcare costs. That's our mandate, correct? The same with our long-term care units. We need to, we have to filter our money where our mandate is first and foremost, and if we have money left over, absolutely, I'm 100% for supporting the hospitals. Thank you.
Councillor Stark?
Yes, I think I agree with Councillor Loosley and Councillor Napper that this is an important project. If you go to page 140 of our booklet, you'll see that on their financial statements of Bluewater Health, under note number 16, commitments, in fact, the project is going ahead. A commitment has been made by the Minister of Health and Long-Term Care in that the ministry will fund $7,478,730 of a total commitment of $8,134,000. So I don't want to leave here with the impression that somehow or other the hospital in Petrolia is not going to be funded. It is being funded. This is supplementary funding that they're looking for. So the project in Petrolia is going ahead. Matter of fact, it's already in progress.
Councillor White?
Thank you, Warden. So to speak to the motion in particular, I do think it's important that when we receive this information back, perhaps by year's end, and we're discussing this again, that the information that's presented to us is very clear about what our actual mandate is. In the meantime, I think our mandate is very clear as a council. We're here to put funding towards programming for health prevention. And when we are taking the hit, as has been mentioned, we have to understand what the ramifications of that hit is going to be on our programming. We've got consultations coming up to try and make sure that our county has a voice at the table with the proposed restructuring. We have to make sure that we understand how that's going to unfold. We have so many other items within our mandate that can help prevent outcomes that Bluewater Health will be dealing with, such as poverty, homelessness, and healthcare and health prevention. So we're doing a lot to try and keep people out of the hospital in the first place, and I think we've got to do better at some of those things still before we can consider throwing large amounts of money at capital projects.
Okay. Anyone else? We have a motion on the floor to defer this for further information. Do you want to read the motion back, please?
Thank you very much. It is moved by Councillor Bradley, seconded by Councillor Cook, that the motion that's currently on the floor in terms of the Bluewater Health ask of $10 million over 10 years at $1 million per year be deferred to next year's budget cycle so as to allow Bluewater Health the opportunity to bring back a submission to County Council fully particularizing its priorities, its needs, and the allocation of its requests, its grant requests to those priorities and needs.
Okay, everyone clear on that? Councillor Bradley?
The only omission was, and I think it is an important point, was I was asking also the county staff work with the operation to come back to us.
Okay. And we'll do another recorded vote, if starting with Councillor Cook.
Councillor Ferguson? Yes. Councillor and declared a conflict. Councillor Loosley? No. Councillor Marriott? Yes. Councillor Miller? Councillor Napper? No. Councillor Rombouts? Yes. Councillor Stark? Yes. Councillor Veen? Yes. Warden Weaver?
Yes.
Councillor White? Yes. Councillor Arnold? No. Councillor Bird? Yes. Councillor Boucher? Yes. Councillor Bradley? Yes. Councillor Broad? Yes. Motion carries.
Okay. So having dealt with the grant requests, we move on to the review of departmental budgets. Councillor Bradley.
Warren, I wonder if it would be appropriate at this time, I'd like, if it is, I'd like to move a motion that we do a review of the capital grant program on the criteria of what projects we will support. And so we're not getting applications for projects we're not going to support. So just a general review, this would take place over the next year, that we would look at what we believe are the fundamental support groups or organizations we would support. So we're not wasting their time or our time. If you would take that as a motion at this point.
Moved by Councillor Bradley, second by Councillor Arnold. Any discussion on that? Just get a, Councillor Cook?
Would that come through committee then, or how would we get that report?
The report will go back to the committee regarding that.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Napper?
Well, it might be a good idea to open up to our nursing homes and our own infrastructure to see if we can get a grant.
Okay. The motion is for a review of our grant policies. I'm just going to call a vote on that. I don't think that needs to be a recorded vote, or do we want a recorded vote on that? Keep it going? All right, we'll do a recorded vote on that as well. Starting with Councillor White.
Councillor Arnold? Yes. Councillor Bird? Councillor Bushy? Councillor Bradley? Councillor Broad? Councillor Cook? Councillor Ferguson? Councillor Hand? Councillor Loosely? Councillor Marriott? Councillor Miller? Councillor Napper? Councillor Rombouts? Councillor Stark? Councillor Vean? Warden Weaver?
Yes.
It carries.
It's good to get a unanimous one. So as we move to tab 4 of the budget, the budget binder, the budget is before us. If we want to go through departments, if there's any questions on that, unless someone wants to make a motion to accept it as presented. Any Councillor White?
Motion to accept. That's what you're looking for, right? To accept tab 4.
Yes, you have a question regarding, are you proposing a motion?
No, I was asking, are you looking for motions to accept these as tab by tab?
Not necessarily. If there's any discussion, any questions regarding everything in tab 4. Councillor Bradley.
Presumably what we'd like is a motion to approve the county operating budget in principle, and subject to change as we move through the book.
That would that probably be acceptable?
Okay, if that works.
Accept the draft for discussion, I guess is what would be the first motion. And who is making that? Councillor Bradley, you will make that motion to accept the draft budget for discussion. Operating it. Yep. Seconded by Councillor Arnold. All in favor of that? That's carried. We didn't have to vote, recorded vote on that. So we're going to discuss the budget now. Any questions regarding the operating and capital budget, or we can go through it page by page? Councillor Stark.
Actually, page 2. I hate to start off that soon, but my question is relative to the Southwest Integrated Fiber Technology. At our last meeting, I believe we dealt with this particular issue, so I'm wondering where does it find its way into the budget, given that we're looking for a reduction to SWIFT in 2020 as per this comment. I'm having a hard time understanding where I can reconcile those two situations.
Who would like to?
Through the chair, very good question. There was a final receivable that was due from SWIFT. As you may recall, there was a report on a fifth project with respect to SWIFT, and that funding that was available as a reduction was utilized as a potential source of funding for that particular project. It was a component of the funding for that fifth project.
Follow-up, Councillor Stark?
So just for clarification, the source of funding for that fifth project was a various methods of financing, accessing 3 different sources, is that correct? And therefore would not have any impact on the current budget?
That's correct. Councillor Loosley?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Warden, I just want to be absolutely clear on this, and I see we're contributing $7.8 million into our reserves. How much are we borrowing? I just want to be clear on this. How much does this budget show that we're going to borrow this year?
So to be very clear, good question again, we have $5.2 million in debt charges for the $80.2 million levy. So that's principal and interest payments in this year's budget.
Yeah, I just didn't hear that first part. So $5 million this year. So I guess, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, why wouldn't we not borrow the $5 million and just put $3 million in reserve? And it's just a concern.
Okay. Yeah, I guess the question is, why are we borrowing money if we have money in reserves instead of utilizing our reserves?
This is, the $5.2 million relates to the debt levels that are currently outstanding. We approximately have $18.9 million worth of debt level or your total mortgage mortgage. So you're obligated to pay the debt servicing costs towards that debt. And that's the amount right now from this year's budget is $5.2 million. And just to clarify, for information, the debt charge is lower than it was last year. So we are making some minor improvements in lowering our debt servicing costs.
Follow-up, Councillor Loosley?
Through you, Mr. Warden, I understand that, but I think the concern I've got is, then why wouldn't we just put $3 million in reserve and use that $5 million to pay our debt? That's all. Thank you.
Okay. Any other, Councillor Broad?
Thanks, Warden. We were under page 4 on tab 4. We talk about contractual payments. Can someone explain to me how they are contractual, such as the SLEP and the Tourism Sarnia Lambton?
Who wants to? Stefan?
Sure. If I understand the question correctly, in the budget, there's a reference to contractual payments to SLEP and or TSL, and the question is, how can we qualify that as contractual payments? Is that the question? Okay. So in terms of SLEP, we do have both SLEP and TSL. We do have a multi-year, 4-year funding commitment that County Council approved. I believe it was 2 years ago or so. And as a result of that, a grant agreement was entered into with both SLEP and TSL for that period of time, i.e. the 4 years, hence why it's a contractual payment.
Okay. Further questions? Councillor Bradley?
Yeah, just on page 6 with the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation. We're going into market value across the province. It's going to have there's going to be a huge backlash across the province. And in the past, we actually stopped at one point paying impact, if some can recall that, because we were so unhappy with the service that we are being provided. And I don't think many people know how much we pay impact as a county to give us this service. So I'm putting that question, how much are we going to pay impact in this year for the market value system?
Through the chair, we're paying approximately, as far as MPAC, our bill's about $2 million in MPAC billings.
impact complaints later this year, and you're seeing all the appeals based on their assessments. We are paying them a lot of money, and the level of service the last time was very disappointing, both on voters lists and on assessment information being provided to us. And we are paying this. It's not the province. It is the local municipalities through the county that are paying this bill. So just be prepared later this year. If the assessments aren't correct in the sense of the number of appeals and the impact on us, we should be questioning the value for money we're getting from impact.
Point taken. Any further questions regarding the draft budget? Councillor White.
So just to clarify, are we sticking to tab 4? Are we going tab by tab? Or are we jumping all over?
We can, any questions regarding any parts of the budget? I think we're debating the budget, the process that has led us to the summary of a 3.4 increase. Councillor Bradley.
Chair, can I just suggest, I think if we just stick to, let's do tab 2, let's do tab 3, and I know we'll fly through some of them and others will probably stop, but I think it might be a bit easier for you and for us too, to get through.
I didn't know whether there was any more questions for tab 4, so if there's no more questions on tab 4.
Yeah, I'm happy to move to tab 15, but I think we should go through each one.
Councillor Han.
So I'm not sure of my fact. I just want to clarify. There's a change in where the voters list is going to come from for the next election. Is that, I just heard it the other day and I can't remember. Is it taking it away from MPAC? It's because of the disappointment in the errors from last election and the problems in the voters list. I understand. So my point is, if they're not providing voters lists, that's less of service. But I can't, I'd have to call back to the office to remember who's going to be doing the voters list.
Mm-hmm. I don't know what.
I just heard it this week.
Do we have any information on what impact changes are going to be? Other than we know we're paying the cost for them, I guess that's, I think it's been communicated to impact through most every municipality that we're dissatisfied with the results we're getting, the quality of the voters list. So I think we are watching them, as is every municipality across the province. So we're looking for changes. Councillor Napper.
Thank you very much, Warden Bill. I just want a clarification on tourism Sarnia Lambton. I see they're asking for an increase of 1.9%. I'm having trouble. I thought we pushed for that destinations. Can somebody explain how that works out, this destination tax we got? It seemed to me we pushed and pushed for that. And the reason we pushed for that was because we could maybe drop our levy down to those folks. But then all of a sudden, the local municipalities are all getting it and slap, and we're still paying, well, we're going to pay 1.9% more. Why is that?
Part of that's the contract that we have with them.
I'll first address the funding commitment that was made. So the grant commitment that was made by council, the agreement that goes with that, and then of course briefly talk about the destination tax, as you put it, the MAT. In terms of the funding commitment, it was a 4-year funding commitment, and under the funding commitment contract that we have with TSL, it is subject to that annual escalator based on CPI, so cost of living, hence why you're seeing the 1.9%. So that explains sort of that increase for 1.9%. Now, in terms of the debate, the discussion on the municipal accommodation tax and its impact on the current funding envelope, there really is none. The county is a separate organization to the municipalities and the MAT. So at this point in time, there is no implication or impact on the funding commitment that County Council made to TSL, at least for the next 2 years. Now, in terms of the MAT, the municipal accommodation tax, the legislation applies, and of course, the regulations to the legislation applies. And it only really stipulates, it only talks about the revenues that are generated from the tax, so that tax revenue from the bylaw that creates the municipal accommodation tax within those municipalities. And the legislation will then dictate what can be done with those revenues, those tax revenues. But the legislation does not dictate what, in this case, the county can do in terms of its funding, future funding commitments, because, and I say future funding commitments only because you've already committed to TSL for the next, for 4 years, which carries over the next 2 years. Hopefully that answers it.
Follow-up, Councillor Knappert?
So is those still restrictions? If I get a whole bunch of money out of this in my municipality, am I restricted how I can spend that then too? Like, I don't understand that part.
So if I understand the question, if your municipality were to adopt a municipal accommodation tax, are there rules legislated that apply to what you can do with the tax revenue from that bylaw? There are definitely rules that apply to the municipal accommodation tax revenues that are generated by the bylaw. Absolutely. It really depends. Those rules really depend on your particular circumstances within your own local municipalities and whether or not you already have a tourism office or tourism program. And then secondly, whether or not you do, then your contractual arrangements with the tourism program or tourism office.
Councillor Rombouts, I believe. You didn't have your hand up. So, Councillor Broad.
Thanks, Warden Weaver. So just a follow-up with Stefan then. I believe in October, Mr. Perrin did a presentation from the TSL to the county, which he clearly indicated that we could not alter our give to TSL based on the Municipal Act. And when I reviewed the Municipal Act, I see nothing in the Municipal Act that says we can't alter that. To Lonnie's point, I think this county council encouraged them for 2 or 3 years to get out there and get the MAT tax into place. So just to clarify, I guess, with Stefan, there is no, we got a 2-year commitment, I understand that. At the end of the 2 years, there is nothing there that states we have to give them that specific amount, correct?
So the legislation, the Municipal Act, and then the regulations to the Municipal Act that prescribe the municipal accommodation tax speak only about the municipal tax revenue. They do not speak generally over grant funding that comes generally from a levy. Now, particularly with the county, from our perspective, because we don't have the municipal accommodation tax at the county level, but that's definitely it. We've had the discussion with Mr. Pellerin at TSL. We did note that there was a commitment from the county funding that continues on for 2 years, and that during that 2 years that there should be an education portfolio or an education effort on their part to ensure that you all understand in your own municipalities what that relationship looks like and can look like.
Okay. Councillor Stark.
I'd like to move to the Sarnia-Lambton Economic Partnership, also on page 4. And I have particular interest in year 3 of a 4-year additional annual increase in base funding of $300,000. My understanding, and well, I'd like clarification what that $300,000 covers.
I can briefly speak to it, and effectively, I'm just reciting history. And in 18, SLEP was having issues with staffing, building up the organization, and they came to this body and asked for an additional bump up of $300,000 to the then existing basic funding that we were providing, and council approved that for a period of 4 years. So there was a basic funding plus $300,000 for a period of 4 years, and that was to ensure that SLEP re-regulated in terms of its staffing complement and its needs.
Follow-up, Councillor Stark?
That's what I thought it was. I believe, I recognize that it was for personnel. So the question is, as we're now going towards year 4, assuming that we're going to obviously honor this 3-year, the 3rd year of a 4-year commitment and subsequently the 4-year. My question is, have we made or are we committed to continuing the staff complement that would then become ingrained in the system? In other words, is the budget simply going to absorb those people moving forward?
Again, I can only speak and recite sort of the history on this. And the question was that the extra $300,000 at the time, the extra $300,000 was a temporary bump up to make those adjustments that slept. Come expiry of this 4-year commitment, then effectively council's decision will be whatever it may be in terms of funding, but everything, all the cards are on the table at that point in time.
Okay. Anything else in tab 4? Tab 5? Oh, Councillor Lucy, your question, tab 4?
Just through you, Warden Bill, again, at the bottom of page 4, I just want to bring this back out again. We're not supporting the hospital we mainly use, but we are contributing $105,000 toward Rathroy Middlesex, just to bring to your attention. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else on tab 4? Tab 5? Tab 6? Tab 7? Tab 8? Councillor Napper, I believe.
I don't know if this is an appropriate time or not, but I would, on here it says here, the procurement and project managing department. That's when we put out and I hope I'm in the right thing, and maybe it's not the proper time to bring it up, but I think there's savings done there. We make a list out of preferred buyers. I guess that comes under that, correct? And so we make it up for this year, then that's there for 3 years or 4 years to term, and each new term of council, we do it again. So if I'm a new entrepreneur, come in, if I miss out on that in the first year, I got to be in business 4 years before I can do business with the county, just to, not to say do business, just get on their preferred buyers list. And I was trying to find the appropriate place to bring it up, and I guess maybe that's here. Shouldn't that be reviewed every year to be fair to people that, I know the questions I got was people right here in Wyoming that's half a mile from it, and the managers can't go and buy from them if they're not on that list, but they can go through a procedure, I guess the way it's explained to me, to get on that list. If you're a management, you're buying a few little items, you're not going to go through all that because it takes a lot of time. But is that something we could look at maybe, and there'd be savings there? Perhaps everybody I talked to said they could save the county hundreds of money, or $100,000.
Guess what you're asking is, what's the procedure to get onto the preferred buyers list, and is there a policy on that? Who has that?
Through the chair, one of our first objectives in this first year is to take a look at all of our existing processes, including purchasing and the way we get vendors on the buyers list. The purchasing policy is one aspect of it, and I totally respect the councillor's views on it, and we'll look into it, is what I can tell you.
Okay.
I think the concern that was expressed is that there might be on year one, that there's a preferred vendors list produced that applies for 4 years. We don't necessarily have that practice. Most of our contract tendering goes on a contract by contract basis, depending on the value of the agreement. And from the value of the agreement, then we'll let contracts. But it depends on the circumstances in terms of if we sign up an agreement for instance, facilities maintenance, and it may be a 2 or 3 or 4 year agreement, then it is what it is. But it would have also been out to tender much like our roads agreements. If there's a road that needs to be resurfaced in any way, it typically goes out to tender, and therefore everybody in the marketplace at that point in time that meets the criteria would be welcome and eligible to submit a bid.
Follow-up, Councillor Napper?
I remember just a few years ago, we have a schmozzle over here. One of our local contractors was put off the list because they had a change of ownership. The son bought out the business. But I think this should be reviewed every year. We shouldn't be restricting people that pay their taxes and everything right in town here. And I was told by, I don't know who I spoke to that was in charge of that they just review it every 4 years. It's a big job. And we're just getting them the opportunity. That's all they want, is the opportunity to do business with the County of Lambton, because they say they pay well.
Okay. I'm sure staff will look at our purchasing policy and see if there's a way to work that into it, whether it comes back to committee or not, but we'll follow up. Oh, Councillor Bird.
Thanks, Warden Weaver. Page 30 in section 8. I've got a question for Ben, if Ben's here. There's $75,000 to hire consultants for local official plan reviews, and I'd like to know what we need the consultants for. Is it for some professional advice, or is it lack of staff, or what's the reason for it?
Is there, who wants to speak to that? Ben's at the back.
Sure. Through you, Mr. Warden, I can have Ben come up and speak to that directly as you wish.
Through you, Warden Weber. So with the coming into force of most of the new county OP, as well as the new provincial policy statement, we do have a need across the county to update local official plans. Due to our work volumes with handling day-to-day inquiries and development review, we do see a benefit in bringing on consultants to assist with these project-specific matters. So what we've done through you, Warden Weber, we've spoken with our local municipal partners, with the administrators, to see whether or not there was a desire to partner with the county on funding these local official plan reviews. So what we proposed in the draft budget, Warden Weber, is to include funds in the amount of $75 or $75,000 to assist with these official plan reviews in the communities of Warwick, Plimpton, Wyoming, as well as Point Edward. And those local municipalities have, through their own budgeting processes, have included funds for that purpose as well for 2020.
Follow up, Councillor Bird?
Yes. So February 19th, the CAO did an attrition management update report. Thank you very much, Ron. And in that report, we're showing a reduction of the FTEs as we're going through. Does our FTE attrition management plan need to be altered? Because if we're hiring less people, but we're just turning around and hiring consultants to fill in, like we got 75,000 there for this consultant to come in, is our attrition management plan defeating the purpose? The purpose was to reduce staff and to find some savings. But if we're just turning around and hire consultants, I'm afraid that our attrition management plan isn't working. I guess my question is it working? And if it's not, do we need a report to move forward to see what we're paying for consultants versus how much staff do we need in each department, full-time equivalents, to efficiently work without hiring all the consultants all the time? Because as you can see, there's quite an overinflated value versus having that singular employee. And I guess my question is to Ron or to any planning head that wants or any department head, is our plan working? If not, what part of it isn't working? Is it a fact that we're striving for this attrition, but we're just turning around hiring consultants in their places? Thank you.
You want to speak to that, Ron?
Yes, thank you. we're supportive of the attrition management plan. It's when you're looking at the positions in the attrition management plan, they tend to be from the long-term perspective, whereas consultants, when you hire a consultant, it's for a temporary, short-term blip to get to work a bubble through the system. And that's typically when we use consultants. The odd time that you can get into some really highly technical specialized expertise, which we don't have. But again, if that were an ongoing thing, like an epidemiologist, we don't have that person on contract. We have that as a staff person. So that's the difference, specialized and short term.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ben. Any other questions on tab 8? Councillor White.
Thank you, Warden Weber. Page 3. Non-service level changes include decreases to the following. $14,930 for traffic light and illumination maintenance due to proactive upgrades of county infrastructure. So when it comes to traffic light, specifically traffic lights, are we moving towards AODA compliance in terms of installing audible crossings?
Mr. Cole?
Through you, Mr. Warden. Those types of situations are being considered on a case-by-case basis. To date, we haven't done a lot of full-scale replacements of these facilities. That savings that we're talking about there is reflective of the savings that we've seen in partnering with our local utility company, Bluewater Power, as opposed to some issues that we've had in the past partnering with outside and out-of-town contractors on a larger scale. Just specifically to that number, when Bluewater Power bid and received their contract, last contract, we saw a considerable efficiency in the way we operate together, as well as the work that they perform locally and are able to get to locally, because they're also doing that service for the city. As far as the specific nature of application of AODA requirements, when we replace those structures and facilities, we are bound by AODA requirements like every other municipality, and we look at that as to that nature.
Follow-up, Councillor White?
Yes, thank you, Warden. So do you project that to be occurring in the next few years? I understand that some of these units are actually quite robust and they're simply not failing and thereby not needing replacement. So that's why my question was, in regards to maintenance, are we just doing a really good job of maintaining these units at this point, but are we anticipating replacement anytime soon to bring us into compliance?
So within the city, we review our needs. That would be our largest electrical component, and we review our needs closely with the city because our traffic signal operations are integral to their traffic signal operations. I don't have a specific number to say we'd be replacing this or that immediately. I know that we have another review coming up with the city that we're looking closely to see what does need to be replaced and not. But I can tell you that traditionally that electrical replacement component has not been a large draw or demand on our capital infrastructure budget. It doesn't happen that regularly for us, and our intersections are limited compared to, say, all the other intersections in the city.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions on tab 8? Tab 9? Councillor Stark?
Yes, this is not specific to a particular page, but it is specific to the topic of public health. And my question is, with the ever increasing concerns around the coronavirus, have we built into any budget mechanism that would allow to address what appears to be a burgeoning healthcare issue, certainly a public healthcare issue? I'm worried about, as we go into this new year, for the next 3 months, as a matter of fact, If this becomes an issue, do we have monies in place to be able to address what could be potentially a very expensive issue?
Mr. Taylor?
Thank you for the question, and through you, Warden Weaver. This budget doesn't anticipate any additional costs in light of the coronavirus that we're facing. I will express confidence to Council that Lambton Public Health does feel that we are resourced to manage what we need to going forward on the ground. I will say to you that we do have experience in managing critical mass. So, for example, when we addressed H1N1 issues in past years, I think it was around 09, 010, we did incur extraordinary expenditures. So the county has a process. If we do meet a crisis point where we are required to expend additional extraordinary expenditures, there's a mechanism to make that happen. And in fact, when it did happen in 2010, the province reimbursed 100% of the costs. So the mechanism is there, and but this budget doesn't anticipate anything additional in that regard.
Follow-up, Councillor Stark?
Has the province been supportive of that kind of approach? Looking back at 2010 as an example, have we had any contact with the Ministry of Health as it relates to potential issues, funding issues going forward?
So daily and more frequent sometimes, our staff, including our medical officer of health, are in consultation with provincial leaders around surveillance and what's happening on the ground. So I'm not aware of where the costs are with respect to incurring extraordinary expenditures, but right now where our focus is not just in the health unit, but in EMS as well, making sure our staff have provisions with respect to masking and personal protective equipment to do their work properly. So the mechanisms are there. If you want some more further, the medical officer of health is here. I could ask Sadiq to expand further if they've been talking at the provincial level about any additional monies, but I'm just not aware that that's come up at this point. But I could certainly look to, if you want some more clarification on that, I could look to our MOH.
Further follow-up?
I don't need to have further follow-up as much as I want to voice my concern that this potentially could, and I don't want to raise alarm either, because I do believe you have it well under control. But if the Ministry of Health appears to be addressing this issue mostly with doctors coming to the microphone and making pronouncements, but they never discuss the financial ramifications. And since we're in a budget session, it seems to me that you need to tie the two together, whether it's now or in the future. My concern is that we're going to be presented with a huge bill, and there's not going to be anybody there other than us to fund it.
So maybe if this is helpful. So with respect to the current budget, and from the pages beginning on page 15 to 18, so our health protection area is staffed for mechanisms to do exactly where the province's focus is right now, which is containment. And that means that we have staff who are doing surveillance, monitoring the big picture to know exactly where this disease is and how it's behaving, local cases, local reports. Every day we are receiving many, many calls from healthcare partners locally and the public. And all of that staffing is happening right now without us presenting any extraordinary costs to the budget. So that's a confidence piece now and today, but I would suggest that should things escalate and should Lambton Public Health or EMS be dealing with any additional pressures, there is a mechanism for us to request from the province one-time additional funding in that regard. But yes, those obligations would fall back to the county if in fact the province didn't fund it. But I would suggest to you on this platform, we're not there yet, and that's why we brought no report to suggest it. But I do appreciate the question, but our planning and the work we're doing on the ground, it's all anticipated in this draft budget at this point.
Councillor Arnold.
Thank you, Warden Weber. I think it's good that Council has looked ahead on not only this issue but others, and that's why we develop the Contingencies and Opportunities Fund, that if there is something in a shortfall, we don't have to go to the general ratepayers en masse in a panic to raise money. There's money there, and we have $10 million or whatever in reserves in that account, and this to specifically address things that may happen like this, Councillor Stark. So I appreciate your comments and concerns, and I also appreciate Andrew's answers, but that's what it's there for, to make sure that we can weather a storm if it comes.
Okay. Anything else on tab 9? Tab 10? Councillor Stark?
I noted in the schedule on page 1, the full and part-time is actually going down in 2020, and yet the next line talks about activities which are going to require an increase of $244,000. Now, I know this is a 50-50 cost-sharing arrangement. I just I'm having a difficult time understanding how you're going to increase activities to accommodate $244,000 with less people.
Through you, Warden Weaver. That's a good question. The Social Services Division is made up of 3 departments, and while the departments have individual budgets, the budgets overlap each other. We use provincial dollars from Ontario Works to cover, for example, our social planners that sit in the homelessness budget. So last year we had a number of retirements, and we took the opportunity to take a really good look at our structure. It's always good to be doing that, and we, as we looked at our structure, it made sense to move our audit team back to Ontario Works. So by moving them back to the Ontario Works area, you'll see there's actually a deficit in the Ontario Works budget and a surplus in the homelessness prevention and social planning area. So they kind of offset each other. And sometimes having, I guess, the separate areas is a challenge because then when the budgets are so merged. So really that 244 is the salaries for several individuals that were moved from another department.
Okay. Anything else on tab 10? Councillor White?
Thank you, Warden Weaver. Page 4. Purchase of service decreased by $156,000 due to decrease in funding for community support worker and $93,000, et cetera. And again, much like Ms. Colasanti just suggested, that perhaps I'm reading this out of context, and so I just have a simple question of clarity. Could you please just discuss these reductions, and are they decreases in service levels due to decrease in demand?
Through you, Warden Weaver. Again, a good question. It's actually not a reduction in the service. It's a reduction in the purchase of service, and I should have been maybe more clear in our verbiage here. We had an employment resource center that we were purchasing from a private contractor that was providing employment programs for Ontario Works and ODSP within Lambton Shared, and we ended that purchase of service agreement. We brought that service in-house, and we're providing that, and that actually is a savings for us. So, and we're really looking to see the results of that change in this year.
Anything else on tab 10? Tab 11? Long-term care division? Councillor Rombout?
Thank you, Warden Weaver. I don't have any issues with the current budget, but I'm wondering, we keep being told that our population is aging, and we see that, right? From all of our communities, we see the aging population. Are we doing anything to accommodate that? Like I don't see any plan here to add new beds to our facilities. Are we just relying on private industries to take up the slack there? Or like, I see a big problem because many of us are aging and we're going to need care going in the next 10, 20 years. Thank you.
Ms. Joris, would you like to respond?
Through you, Warden Weaver. Yes, actually in the 2020 budget, we've put some money in for consulting to look at a feasibility study for Lambton Meadowview Villa. So I think all of you know that Lambton Meadowview Villa is 27 years old this year and not really conducive environmentally to the care that we provide to the people there. So we're looking at a variety of different accommodations, whether we should add beds, what sort of care, levels of care we might want to provide there. And also, we have a large piece of property there, and looking at should we be putting in some supportive housing? Are there some other options for that site, like a campus of care?
Councillor Napper?
Wasn't it just, I just think the government announced that they were going to make, what, 90, how many new beds for, the announcement that they're going to provide across Ontario was a whole bunch of new beds. And I think that's just ludicrous with the crisis we got with workers. We can't get enough workers to man the beds we got now. Why wouldn't we lobby them to maneuver that money around and give it to us it just seems crazy to me, like. And,
That's a great question, and a big question for the province. Just last week, or I think 2 weeks ago, Minister Fullerton made an announcement that she struck a task force to look at a staffing strategy for long-term care. Part of that was one of the recommendations from the inquiry into the safety and security of residents in the long-term care system. And part of it is related to the recruitment and retention issues that we have across the province, not just with PSWs, with all positions in the sector. So we're waiting to hear what kind of resources might be coming out of the provincial budget for that task force, and she's promised to have us a plan by the end of 2020.
Okay. Any other questions on tab 11? Tab 12, cultural services. Tab 13. Tab 14. Tab 15. Councillor Bradley?
Not sure where this is appropriate, but sort of going back to where Councillor Loosely was coming from, we know how much debt the county has, and this has been raised here before. There are places like Essex County which are debt-free, and so they're not paying those. And the city is getting very, very close to being in that position in the next number of years. I think it's time we revisited our plans on reducing the debt and keeping that and getting that debt down, so we have more room to maneuver, especially when we see what's brewing out there in the next couple of years with the province and the federal government. So all I'm asking for is we can get a copy of the present debt reduction strategy to the next meeting, and along with some alternatives, perhaps on what we can do to be more aggressive in paying down our debt and not taking on more debt, if possible. Just a general report, and it doesn't have to be to the next meeting because it's a structural issue. But I think it's time we had that discussion again here.
Mr. Belchero?
Thank you for the question. As far as a debt management policy, I think it's a prudent exercise for any county to take a look at and basically see where you want to be as far as your practices. Basically, like I said at the start of the presentation, your financial health is good, your reserve funds are low, your debt levels are low. Doesn't mean as a county council you can't go to a lower level. And I think with the forthcoming report, you can have constructive discussion on that.
I have to have that come back in context of dealing with the 2021 budget, if that gives you some time to do it.
Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Loosely? Question, Councillor Stark?
Is this not, or would it not, be part of the asset management plan? I mean, it seems to me that the two dovetail.
Weaver, there's several financial policies that a county can take a look at. For example, you can have an asset management policy, a debt management policy, a surplus policy. There's a variety of financial policies that are prudent to look at in order to ensure your financial health remains strong. But you're definitely correct, Councillor Stark, that your debt management practices are a definite tie-in into your asset management policy.
Okay. Follow-up, Councillor Stark?
I guess the point that I'm making, or trying to make, is that you can't look at one without the other. And like, I'd hate to think that we get focused so entirely on debt reduction that somehow or other we forget that the offset is the deficiencies as it relates to asset management.
That is absolutely correct. I can agree with you more. However, when you take a look at stuff like debt management policies, you can look at debt caps for certain categories of capital expenditure. Capital expenditures, you have debt cash ratios that you can try to strive to get at. There's a whole variety of things that are particularly specific to a debt management policy. For example, even the term of your debt. Should you be going after 3, 5, or 10-year term? And the timing of issuance. Right now, we have a significant rate reduction that we're seeing out there in the environment, and it could be an opportune time to basically look at potential debt issuances, especially if you have some capital infrastructure requirements that you're going to be looking at over the next 5 to 10 years.
Okay, so there is a motion on the floor from Councillor Bradley, second by Councillor Loosely, to have a review of our debt servicing and asset management. Do we want a recorded vote on that one too? Don't need one. All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item tab. Have we gone through tab 15? I think we have. Is there any further changes to the draft budget? If not, I'd like a motion for approval. Councillor Loosely.
Thank you, Warden. Bill, I just wanted to bring this up. I know we talked about it before, but I think it's important for us to really do our job with the budget. I find it very difficult when we don't have a column with the actual amounts. And I think we should consider for future ones that, and I think the previous finance director stated that they had the information. It was just a matter of putting it in. And I think it was council wishes last year, we just left it the same. But I'd like to propose a motion that County Council direct administration to include a new column throughout the budget entitled Actual Expenditures, and starting in 2021, so that instead of comparing budget to budget, we would see the actual expenditures as well as budget to budget. And I can speak to this if I can get a seconder for that motion.
Councillor Stark, seconded. Councillor Loosely.
Yeah, thank you, Warden Bill. I just wanted to mention as I stated, it was stated last year, the information I received from that it's not a lot of work, that it was already in the computer system, and it was just a matter of putting it in a column. And I just think even if the budget was delayed 2 weeks, if you had to wait for the expenditures to come in from the previous year, you wait till normally the end of January. If we had to wait an additional 2 weeks, if we had to, I think we could do that. But I really think it's important for us to do our job as a county councillor. It would be really nice to see if you're $1 million under or $1 million over. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Arnold.
Around where Councillor Loosely is coming from, because under my tab 1, I have all the totals here, and it's a comparative to last year in overall, and then I have the county impact one on the next page. So how much more detail are we looking for? Because we used to have a budget book that had minute detail, and I think that's why there was a task force through the county that was organized to take a look at this. But is that not what you're looking for, Councillor Loosely, what we got under tab 1 and the first 2 pages that are a couple pages long each?
Well, if I'm looking at it, the correct one, you've got budget compared to budget and the difference between the budgets. Yes. If you look at it, says budget 2019, budget 2020, the difference change. I'm saying you instead of just going budget to budget, I would like to see the actual amount that was spent that year. Thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion? Councillor Loosely.
If no further discussion at the end, I'd like to request a recorded vote on this, please.
Okay. Recorded vote. Starting with Councillor Ferguson. Oh, wait a minute, got a question. Councillor Bird.
Just for clarification, what is the motion that we're voting on? Is it just to add an actual to what's already there? Because we already got the two budgets there.
It'll be hard to have the actual till the audited statements are done. Okay. I was thinking, and I just had clarification, we have had this motion on the table before that to add this line in the budget, and it was defeated. So this will have to be a reconsideration of that motion and before we go forward with this. So the motion is on the table. It is very similar to a motion that was defeated before. The other aspect is it will be more than a couple of weeks delay to have the actual numbers put on because of year end and timing. It could be a couple of months to get actual. So, Councillor Loosely.
And I do remember that. I have no problem. I think it's not audited statements I'm asking for. It's basically just your actuals as of that time. And I would certainly, if that's the case, I would just make a motion that this be reconsidered at our next meeting then.
Okay. So we have the motion to be reconsidered at the next meeting. We're going to vote on the reconsideration now, whether it's considered at the next meeting or not. So if this motion passes, we will deal with it at the next meeting. If this motion fails, the motion has been not reconsidered. So, Councillor Ferguson.
Councillor Hine? Councillor Loosely?
Yes.
Councillor Marriott? Councillor Miller? No. Councillor Napper? No. Councillor Rombouts?
Yes.
Councillor Stark?
Yes.
Councillor Veen? No. Warden Weaver?
No.
Councillor White?
Yes.
Councillor Arnold?
No.
Councillor Bird? Is that a no? Councillor Boucher?
Yes.
Councillor Bradley?
Yes.
Councillor Broad?
No.
Councillor Cook?
Motion is defeated.
It's defeated.
Okay. We've gone through the budget binder. We have not made any exceptions or motions to change any amounts. So the draft budget that's before you is being presented with a tax levy increase of 3.42%. Is there a mover for that budget? Deputy Warden Marriott, seconded by Councillor Napper. Any questions regarding that Councillor Bean.
Thank you, Ward and members of County Council. I'd just like to thank all the departments for the hard work they put into this, and I think it's really great. Thank you very much.
Okay. Any further discussion? Councillor Bradley?
Yeah, just a quick question to the Treasurer. Can you remind us of this 3.4, how much of that was provincial and how much was in our control? So I know it's in the report, but I think it's important to be reminded.
Do you want me to go ahead? Yep.
So really quick, 3.42%, 1.37% provincial downloading, or roughly 40% of the increase is was due to provincial downloading, public health, court services, and long-term care. 1.3% was basically your base budget increase, which is well below in CPI, and 1.8% is basically your investment in infrastructure and ensuring that you got adequate reserve funds in order to basically deal with your capital asset management plan.
Okay. Councillor Napper?
If that's compared, Larry, to the new growth, how does it work out? Like we were high with the new growth this year in Lambton County, and that would offset some of that provincial downloading.
The councillor is correct. We have about 1.05% increase in assessment growth, and we've applied that to the overall rate increase of 4.47%.
Okay. We will, seeing no further questions, I'm going to call the vote. Councillor Napper.
Councillor Rombouts? Yes. Councillor Stark?
Yes.
Councillor Bean? Yes. Warden Weaver?
Yes.
Councillor White? Yes. Councillor Arnold? Yeah. Councillor Bird? Yes. Councillor Bushy? Yes. Councillor Bradley? Yes. Councillor Bride? Yes. Councillor Cook? Yes. Councillor Ferguson? Yes. Councillor Hand? Yes. Councillor Loosley? Yes. Councillor Marriott? Yes. Councillor Miller? That carries.
Thank you. That certainly, I'll echo what Councillor Bean has said with the budget. A lot of work has gone into this. Staff did a great job of pulling this all together. All the department heads and all the people involved that have been in the gallery this morning have certainly contributed, and I'm very pleased that we've been able to pass the budget as presented, which is a good thing. So, moving on, we have a couple of more items. Notices of motion. Item A is a notice of motion from Councillor Bird asking for a resolution to investigate the feasibility of building a waste-to-energy plant, take care of all counties' waste disposal, clean up the environment, create lots of skilled jobs with relatively high pay, and take one of our most challenging social problems and turn it into a source of new wealth for our local economy. That's moved by Councillor Bird. We have a seconder for that. Councillor Arnold. Discussion. Councillor Bird.
Thank you, Warden Weaver. So this is a huge issue, and as we've been discussing lately with counties' waste disposal matters, time goes very, very quickly, so we need to plant a good seed. So I think about man has travelled to outer space and landed on the moon, and with all this great technology, we still have gaping landfill sites full of decomposing materials. And the waste to energy is a method of waste disposal that reduces greenhouse gases, generates clean energy, recycles metal, and is widely recognised as a technology that can help mitigate climate change. Trash is burned as feedstock at high temperatures, and the vapours are harnessed to create fuel, gas, or steam and electricity. It produces ecologically sound, cost-effective energy, has less than half of the emissions currently being released from open landfill sites, and no waste is ever wasted. Ashes remaining after incineration can be used in agriculture and/or as an aggregate in road construction. Trucking of waste long distances can be greatly reduced, and tipping fees remain in the community where the waste is generated. Everyone talks about recycling, but the biggest environmental problem is the rotting material in the landfill that releases methane gas, which in short term can drive the climate change at a much faster pace than emissions from other sources. That gas and the slurry left over from putrefying waste is the most serious problem. Building large effective infrastructure projects requires good governance and sound business practices. Waste collection needs organised infrastructure and logistics. And importantly, citizens need to be educated about proper, healthy disposal of waste. Part of the attraction of waste to energy technology is that it's a dual-purpose solution. It rids urban areas of their growing waste problem while generating electricity as a byproduct. A sustainable future lies in changing behaviour, growing many more trees and transitioning towards a zero landfill future. Now, I'd like to add that Sweden is the world's leader in this area, and they are so efficient doing this in their country that they run out of waste. They actually run out of waste. They buy waste from England, Germany, France and Norway, and still, even paying other countries for their waste, they end up with at least 100 million profit each year. So they've been doing this for years and years, and you go around all the countries in Europe, in Asia, they're all way, way advanced into this area. And I think that because of all the professional jobs that this could create, these are not just everyday labour jobs, they are professional, skilled jobs that have probably a 40-year lifetime, high-paying jobs. So once you build a facility like this, not only does it take care of the environment, but it takes care of all the other things that we're looking at. So, and I would like a recorded vote on this one, please.
Okay. Councillor Arnold. And then we'll go.
Thank you, Warden Weaver, member of County Council. I appreciate Margaret bringing this forward, and what it does is it helps us look at the opportunity around green bins, which we've all chatted about from time to time. But I'm hoping that through the report that we get around the feasibility, that we'll also get a summary of past practices and efforts that have been done through the county, because we have harnessed methane gas and that kind of stuff before. And I think county's done a great job, and they have some history there that also will kind of dovetail into this whole piece. So I'm hoping to see that when the report comes back.
Councillor White.
Thank you, Warden. I'm familiar with much of what Councillor Bird raised, and I think it's important to start planning for the future. Some of what is possible is being done as close as Oshawa, where they're actually harvesting out of their landfill very valuable materials and turning it into profit and turning other materials into energy as well. I'm curious as to how, I will support the motion. I'm curious as to how this would play in the province's ongoing plan to move towards zero waste and imposing the green bin programs on municipalities after they upload the costs of the recycling programs. And I'm also curious if it doesn't include specifically an anaerobic digester in this motion, I'd like to ensure that that at least is part of the feasibility. Anaerobic digestion could actually be, not only is it a responsible use of green materials, it could actually be a source of revenue if we start to bring it in from other municipalities as well. It's going to go somewhere when composting is mandated. This might be an opportunity for our municipality to get in the business and earn a little extra revenue.
Okay. Any other discussion? Well, Councillor Bird.
Thank you, Warden Weaver. I would just like to add, because when this subject has been brought up in previous years, and from my experience in Canada, I remember, I think 1985, the first time when I was working in the Valley, that this particular topic was brought up. And at the time, they said it was too expensive, I believe, to go ahead. Mayor Bradley might remember more about it. But when people ask what are the negative sides of this, you know, lots of times people will just say really quickly, well, we don't have enough of a population here to versus the cost of putting this in place. But if you ask all the countries and people that have got them already, we have 6 in Canada, we have 100 in the USA, and thousands everywhere else around the world. But Canada has the lowest amount of these plants so far. And if you ask Sweden, the world leaders who I referenced earlier, they will tell you it's got nothing to do with population. It's not actually the numbers of people who live here, it's the amount of waste that we generate, plus if we're going to get other people bringing their garbage to us. I mean, we want to reduce long road trips, obviously like Toronto over to the States and things like that. But for the county, everybody could be bringing their waste to one place and increasing the tipping fees and preventing all the long distance travelling with everybody's waste. So I think there's lots of things to consider, and I'm sure that if staff are going to agree to bring a report forward, they'll cover all these points. So thank you.
Councillor Nappert.
We were being invaded by Toronto trash and went to a couple of symposiums in Toronto, and this was brought up. And the big thing was the environmental impact that these incinerators and stuff like that created with the heavy metals and stuff. They said it was a bigger drawback and harder on the environment than that. So I recall those things, and I recall going to one, and it was ironic enough that there was 2 professors there that was supposed to educate it. They both went, I think it was Western, both had the same instructor, but they had 2 different views, and you're sitting there trying to get an answer, and it seems to be whatever you want to read on the internet you can read, but no, it's
Okay, Councillor Ombout.
I just want to thank Councillor Bird for bringing this to Council's attention and remind Council that an EA takes 10 years. So if we got started today, it would be at least, at the very minimum, 10 years until this project got off the ground. And I've been told, as the mayor of Warwick Township, we all know that we're home to one of the largest landfills in Ontario, and it's filling up quickly. They doubled the fill rate last year, and they not only met the doubled fill rate, but they exceeded it last year. And they kept raising their prices. There is big money in garbage right now, unfortunately, and I agree with Councillor Bird. The sooner we get looking into this, the better.
Okay. Councillor Bird.
Thank you, Warden Weber. I would just like to comment on Councillor Napper's words on this, that I don't have right up-to-date information today, but the last time that I was checking, and I'm always checking, you mentioned about the possible emissions from such a plant as the waste-to-energy. If you go back to the experts in this in Sweden and everywhere else, they'll tell you that one plant conceivably can give about 50% of the emissions of only one landfill site. You add all the landfill sites together, you've got an incredible mess. We already have that. Yeah, no, I just wanted to clarify that, so thank you.
Okay. I'm going to call the question, a recorded vote, if we can have the randomizer. And we're starting with, This is item A, yep. This is dealing with the environmental waste cleanup, starting with Councillor Boucher. No. Okay, thank you. Second notice of motion is from Councillor Bird as well. I'll let you introduce your motion. This is, it's been...
Point of order, Mayor Warden Weber. I appreciate the passion from Councillor Bird for bringing the motion forward again. I think we passed and defeated similar motions to these last year, so I would think that this should be a notice of reconsideration before it should go forward onto the floor.
Okay. Is there a seconder for the motion of reconsideration? Councillor Marriott.
Excuse me, Warden Weber. I would just like to say, first of all, it's important, this is not a reconsideration. It's a completely different motion. I have never before, on any of the previous 7 motions, focused on security. This one is purely on security, and so it's not a reconsideration at all.
We have a motion on the floor for reconsideration. I believe the motion on November talked about a third-party unbiased audit of the homes, and I believe this is a similar motion. But it's up to council whether they believe it's a consideration, or a reconsideration. And is that correct with the clerk?
So that's correct. So again, I'll just explain the procedures involved. The motion that was presented by Councillor Bird is not presented outright as a notice of reconsideration. However, council as a body can look at any motion and determine whether the pith and substance of the motion is effectively a reconsideration of a prior motion or subsumed in a prior motion. And then once council makes the decision whether or not, ultimately the decision made by the warden, if it's a reconsideration, then you vote on whether or not you wish to reconsider. And if you do wish to reconsider, then the motion gets moved over to your next meeting. Ultimately, that being said, that's a process on a reconsideration. The substance of the issue is equal, whether or not you deal with it as a reconsideration or on the substance of it. On a reconsideration, it's a 50% majority. So if 50% of you or more of you view it as a reconsideration, it just moves over and you decide whether or not you wish to reconsider, or you deal with the substance, and the substance is dealt with on a 50% vote as well. So again, in terms of the procedure, the notice of motion is not presented as a reconsideration outright. Council can, as a body, look at a motion and determine whether or not it is effectively a reconsideration of a prior motion. That's the decision that this council makes through ultimately your ruling, Chair Warden. And then in terms of practical realities is that it's a 50% vote either way, whether you view it as a reconsideration or if you vote on the substance of the motion.
Councillor Boucher.
I voted no for the last motion that she presented, but I think this is a different motion. Let me tell you why. There was a lot of financial obligations in the last motion. This motion here is basically to ask the CEO, along with the minister, to give us a report in the following. Basically, that's what the motion is all about. If you read it very carefully, it's the CEO with the help of the government of Ontario and ministers come up with some kind of recommendations.
Okay. So the motion on the floor is that this is a reconsideration. So if you vote in support of the reconsideration,
So the motion.
given the discussion that this is maybe not a reconsideration, I'm going to rule that this is not a reconsideration, and we're going to vote on the direct motion that's on the Councillor Stark.
Yes, in the body of the motion, it talks about a arrange an urgent third-party unbiased audit. So how do you accomplish an unbiased audit without costs attached to it?
Okay. Before we have further discussion, we need to have the motion put on the floor. So Councillor Bird, you will move this motion. Is there a seconder for that? And Councillor Boucher seconded that. Okay. Discussion. Councillor Bird.
Thank you, Warden Weber. And as it said, I'm looking to check on the security of the outside access to the facility, security of the residents within the homes, security and uses of the closed-circuit cameras, and mental health security of the employees working in the homes, and the security of medication doses, all very important topics. So many people associated with MGM, as well as the other two county LTC homes, share the same views and conclusions. And the complaints are continuing to come in, especially in light of last year's intruder incident, which took until February the 14th this year to hit the media. And from what I understand, the two MGM employees who reported the incident have now been suspended. Security is a very large umbrella that covers many topics. Use of security cameras to monitor not only who enters and leaves the buildings, but also the activities of staff and residents throughout the homes. Additionally, complainants have told me that the cameras are used for other purposes too, especially when management is looking for reasons to let staff go. And I'm told there is only video, no audio, so the results can be very wrongly interpreted. Then there is the security of the employee's mental health. Of course, one's mental health should be protected and secure at all times, but I'm told that recently, with all the bullying that takes place, some of the employees are in such a mental state that they are reporting they feel suicidal. And due to their desperate need to keep their jobs, they dare not say anything for fear of penalties. And this continuing situation is apparently creating the mental health insecurity. Closed-circuit cameras should always be viewed vigilantly by the staff on duty at the time. Proaction is the only acceptable noun. Reaction is not an acceptable excuse in any scenario throughout the long-term care homes. A report last month told me of how one resident at MGM took a pillow and tried to suffocate another resident who was in bed recovering from brain surgery. Fortunately, a PSW was close at hand and was able to intervene at the time. However, if cameras are being used and sufficient staff are on shift, incidents like this that threaten one's safety and security should never happen. Also, another report told me about a female resident at MGM who had a certain level of dementia that caused her to always be shouting, and so sedation medication was used, but apparently over-medicating this resident caused her to keep falling and hitting her head. Hence, the security of her mobility and safety was jeopardized. This is a fight for the rights and dignity of our vulnerable seniors who have worked so hard to build this community in which we live. I believe those seniors deserve the utmost security and the very best that we can give them during the autumn and winter of their lives. And I would like a recorded vote on this, but before we take the vote, councillors, I would like to ask you, why would you not support this? Certainly, if the homes are being run as efficiently and as well as you believe them, surely you would want an independent audit to bring forward that finding. If it's not, then certainly what needs to be done for the benefit of our vulnerable seniors has to be done. Thank you.
Discussion? Councillor Stark.
I asked the question again. What is the cost of an independent third-party audit?
I believe we had a report earlier regarding this. It could give a summary of what the cost could be.
At the last request for an audit, we got some quotes from other municipalities as well as some organizations that do this kind of work, and it was between $300,000 and $350,000 to do an audit on all three homes.
Councillor Stark, follow up.
At the last committee meeting, I raised this issue with the intent of trying to understand how the security could potentially be enhanced at specifically Marshall Golden Manor. And I asked the question whether or not entry bracelets could be used by all staff. And I believe I was given the answer that it would be impossible to regulate the entry of visitors. But that wasn't the issue. The issue was, can we deal with our staff to ensure that the appropriate staff are in the building? And my understanding is that there are now picture IDs, but I don't think that's good enough. Having said that, I don't think this needs any audit to occur. What we need is improvements, and the staff should be able to implement improvements.
Councillor Napper?
Well, thank you very much. I don't think you need that people to come in like that. I think they've done a lot. We've got a report back there. It was an unfortunate incident that happened up at Marshall Golden Manor, and but I thought that was dealt with correctly. I asked Mrs. Bird if she talked to Mrs. Joris on it and talked to staff as to what's been done. I'd like to see a report from Jane come back and say, here's what we've done to improve these things. This is what we're doing, because I see them every day. I see them, people wearing bracelets. I see guys standing there trying to get out and what you got to do. And you know, people hollering. You're going to get that. I don't care what home you go to. They'll stand there. The poor souls, that's why they're there. If they didn't holler, they wouldn't be there. And so, you know, that's things you have to do. And I think it just breaks my heart when I hear you talk about how bad the care is in this home and my wife's there. And I take it really, I take it personal. And I shouldn't, I guess. But I think all we need here is for Mrs. Joris to come back with a report and tell us. Maybe you could sit down with her. I don't know if you ever met with her or not. It don't sound like you have. And say, what have you done here? What have you done here? And we got the ministry that's supposed to be protecting us here, of everybody, the vulnerable people and stuff. They're doing their job. They give them a good report. Let's see what we've done rather than spend $200,000, $300,000. There's other places on that building you can spend $300,000 to do a hell of a lot more good than that. That's all I got to say.
Councillor Bird, then Councillor Bradley.
Thank you, Warden Weaver. I would like to suggest that at this point, we don't know what it would cost. It may not cost anything, it may cost something, it may cost a lot, but because we want to involve the Minister of Long-Term Care, I think we should first inquire whether there would be a cost, what the cost would be. I don't think we can go through our normal routes, and I would like to partly address Councillor Napper's comments. I have met with everybody and I'm getting complaints on a daily basis. We cannot overlook these anymore. For the last 6 years, complaints have been coming in and they have not been addressed. So that's why we need to do something a little bit different and go to somebody unbiased outside of the county. We need these to be addressed and we need it to be done now, because every minute spent by seniors in these homes, they're worried. People are feeling they don't want to speak because they'll be penalised. And I'm the voice for the community. I'm the one that's getting all these calls and I'm bringing them forward. We need to do something. And if, as I said earlier, if you feel that everything's great, then an outside audit would bring this to show us that everything's great. If it's not, then we need to do something about it. But we can no longer rely on what we have internally in place, because clearly after 6 years, we're not getting the results that we need to get. So I would like to suggest that we contact the Long-Term Care Minister's office to see how this could be put in place and what they would charge us to come down and do this kind of an audit for us.
Councillor Bradley.
Separate motion on the floor.
This is the motion that's on the floor that was presented in the notice of motion.
Okay, I just want to refocus this. I'm more than willing to support the motion, but I'm looking at the action items. They're very specific. And I think that could be done through the long-term care ministry at no cost at all. And the other issues that are being raised are not really part of this motion. And I think a lot of this has got blurred together because of this being an ongoing issue. But these are fair questions to ask. And with all respect to Mayor Napper there, I can point you across the province, home after home, where there have been issues, serious issues. And I'm not going to state some of the more public ones, where there hasn't been the proper care and consideration. And I believe north of us here, they removed the entire administration responsible in one of the counties. But I'm looking at the motion itself, and to me the motion itself is a reasonable proposal to review Because when it's all said and done, we really are the boards responsible for these institutions. So to ask the Ministry of Long-Term Care at no cost to review these action items and to come back to us as soon as possible. That's what I think we're being asked to do today. And who could argue against that? I mean, it's just a reasonable thing.
So that's changing the motion.
Well, if the mover would accept
Is it a friendly amendment to the motion?
Yes.
That we ask long-term care to provide the report that I believe they reported on at the last committee meeting? Are you agreed to the friendly
I agree,
amendment?
Warden Webber, to the changes, just as long as we can be clear that we're not asking long-term care, we're asking the Minister of Long-Term Care.
To provide a follow-up report on. Okay. If it's agreeable to change that we ask the Minister of Long-Term Care for a report, that would not involve any expenditure by the county. Councillor Arnold, you had a comment.
Thank you, Warden Weaver, members of County Council. I'm just trying to get my head around, I know that the ministry comes in and they do audits and inspections on a regular basis. And I would assume that they would look at the security of the buildings and the security of the people inside and all that as part of their investigation and their audit already. Am I misunderstanding what their purpose is? Like, I'm sure they don't come in and have a coffee and a donut, talk to somebody and go home, because I've seen some of the, a few years ago, I've seen quite a comprehensive list of things that they go through and whether or not we meet those criteria or not. And it seems to be that this is kind of dovetailing into what we're already getting, but I guess I would like to know from Ms. Joris if what it is that we get from them that would be different from this.
Do we have, what is in our long-term care reports?
The items that are listed here are almost all covered in the Long-Term Care Homes Act. And so when the ministry comes in and does an inspection, they do look at all of the things that we're required to do to be in compliance with the Act, as well as other pieces of legislation, including privacy, which would reflect the closed-circuit cameras. The mental health security of the employees would really be our own responsibility as the County of Lambton. The medication procedures are in the Act, and there have been some changes from the inquiry into the safety and security of residents in long-term care around medication security related to glucagon and insulin, and that's been as recently as 2 weeks ago. So the inspections that the ministry does, often there's 1 or 2 inspectors. They'll be in the homes for anywhere from a day to 2 weeks, depending on what they're inspecting. And if there's something triggered from an inspection they're doing that requires an inspection in another area, that's what they'll do when they're in the home. And the reports are then provided back to us, as well as posted publicly. And the incident in December, we addressed everything that was required in that report, and those orders have been cleared.
Councillor Bean?
Thank you, Warden. To Jane, when the ministry comes in to do these inspections, do they go through your security cameras and look at the file footage and what's been done on that?
Through you, Warden Weaver. Yes, they do. They often ask to look at the video, and we provide that to them. One of the recommendations that was originally contemplated through the inquiry was around closed-circuit televisions, and we do have, Councillor Bird is correct, we do have a lot of cameras in our homes in almost all the areas except the residence bathrooms and bedrooms.
Follow-up? Yeah, just a quick follow-up. So how far back does the security cameras record? I guess that's a big item.
Through you, Warden. It's a variety, because we have a variety of programs, because they were installed differently. A couple of weeks. If we can look at it real time as well. We use it for falls investigations, to see who's at the front door after hours, who's come in and out of the building. So usually, if there's something that we need to investigate, we would copy that time period of video and keep that according to the Privacy Act and our policies. But it's about 2 weeks. A little longer in some places, a little shorter. And some of it's related to movement. So depending on what's been going on in that area and the room on the server, it might keep it a little longer, a little less.
Councillor Stark?
There were some very serious allegations, specifically on human resources, that were part of the councillor's dissertation. Are any of those correct? And most importantly, as it relates to the 5 items on the security side, are we in compliance?
As far as the security side, I believe that we are in compliance. We've met everything the ministry asked us to do. We've also been doing some investigating into different ways of providing visitor tags where people would sign in with a kiosk, say who they were visiting, why they're in the home, and the staff would be able to identify that. We're not sure how we would manage that, and we're looking at some other systems as well. As far as the human resource issues, we use the Human Resource Department at the county for any issues that we have. We have 200 staff in the home in Sarnia, and we're always working with our staff and with our union to make sure that we have a acceptable workplace. Recently, Unifor and the Ontario Health Coalition did a paper called Caring in Crisis, which was mostly about the PSW recruitment retention issues, but it also talked about how negative press and difficulties in resources has really provided us with lots of difficulties in recruitment retention, and it's very disturbing for the staff when they, hear all these challenges that we're having. But we're doing very difficult work with limited resources, and I believe that the staff we have are doing good work.
Thank you. Councillor Bird?
Thank you, Warden Weaver. I'd like to make a few comments. I'd like to respond to Councillor Stark. He referred to my dissertation and the allegations. Everything that is reported to me from the people in the public, the staff at the homes, the residents at the homes, the families, the friends, the visitors, I've had all categories reporting to me. And yes, I do check on them to make sure that I've got no reason to dispute what people phone in over the 3 homes, but I do check on them most of the time. And the other important thing is that Councillor Arnold mentioned about if we already have ministry people coming in here, but this is the very problem that we have. We need somebody different so there's no conflict of interest, any possible conflict of interest, and everything I read in the reports are always reactions to incidents. We cannot afford reactions. We have to have proaction. And going back to the incident where one resident tried to smother another resident who'd just come back from brain surgery, if a PSW hadn't been there, there was only one, If they hadn't have been there and seen this, that person could have died. So we have to be proactive. And I look back over the last 6 years' reports, complaints, everything, and all we've done is react. We have to change that. So this is why I'm trying to emphasize it's really important that we get the long-term care minister herself here, someone that hasn't been here or somebody that's not here on a regular basis to do the normal checks. Because if you look at what just happened a couple of months ago, that was a reaction. It should never have happened. So I really can't emphasize enough, if we want to make this the best scenario we can, be proud of the 3 homes that we have here. And I think that we have to do something finally about this so that we can move on. So I really emphasize the importance of doing this so that we can be proactive. Thank you.
Councillor Bird.
In other words, the friendly amendment that was offered by Mike doesn't sound like Councillor Bird is happy with that because it still involves ministry staff. Is that correct? Am I hearing this correctly?
I'd like, yeah,
Chair,
we need
that was-
clarification on what the motion is.
Mayor Bradley did say that. I agreed with his amendment that he said we get the minister, the long-term care minister herself to be involved in this check, this report.
So we're going to invite the Minister of Long-Term Care to review.
For clarification, it was the Ministry of Long-Term Care to do the review. Ministry. And I presume that would be directed to the
There's
Ministry.
a conflict there between the ministry and the minister.
Thank you, Warren. As long as it's not the same people that normally come here. What we're looking for are different individuals. We don't want any possible perceived conflict of interest. That was my only point there, that we have different individuals, but still from the ministry.
Okay. Any other discussion? We've been asked for a record. Councillor White.
Thank you, Warden. So again, just for clarity, we're looking at receiving a no-cost report or comments on the 5 items indicated in this motion: security of outside access, security of residents within the home, security and use of closed-circuit cameras, mental health security, and security of medication doses. So we're looking for a no-cost comment on those 5 items from the ministry. Am I 100% clear on that?
Is that clear?
Correct. So the motion that's currently on the floor, moved by Councillor Bird, seconded by Councillor Boucher, is a motion as you read it in the document now, and effectively that would ask for the audit on those 5 items to be carried out through the Ministry of Long-Term Care, their staff, and if that's approved, there's no authority for us to spend any dollars on that exercise.
Councillor Hand.
For clarification for myself, the audit was done in December on those items. Is that not correct, following the incident, and then we had a report on what needed to be changed? I'm not understanding what's different.
Is there that these items were looked at in the report that we had?
The security of the outside of the facilities was looked at. The residents within the home, to a certain extent, related to the incident. The closed-circuit cameras are a fairly common issue. I don't think they had any concerns about those because they use that video as well. And medication doses, that was also inspected as well. And there's also resident quality inspections that happen regularly, which are not because of a complaint or a concern. We have not had one in one of our homes for a while. I think I explained in my performance report on the performance report that our homes are considered high performing by the ministry, so we haven't had a full RQI for a couple of years in any of our homes.
Okay. Any other comments before I call the vote? Councillor Bird.
Thank you, Warden Weber. Just to reiterate that we are being reactive right now, and even if we did have, checks carried out in December, we're still having all the problems, and somebody nearly died just recently. So this isn't good. We have to do something differently, and that's what I wanted to really emphasize. Thank you.
Councillor Napper?
Can I just reaffirm, all those complaints come in January then, that you're referring to? Like, we had the thing done in December, you've had a chance, but this is February, you've had a chance to react to it, or whatever you want to call it. But these are concerns that come in since then?
Through the chair, over the last couple of months, yes. Since December.
Okay. I'm going to call the vote. The motion is for Ministry of Long-Term Care to provide a further review of the security at the 3 homes at no cost to the municipality.
Yeah, the motion is as stated in your materials.
And we're starting with Councillor Arnold.
Councillor Bird? Councillor Boucher? Yes. Councillor Bradley? Yes. Councillor Broad? No. Councillor Cook? No. Councillor Ferguson? No. Councillor Hand? No. Councillor Loosely? Yes. Councillor Marriott? No. Councillor Miller? No. Councillor Napper? No. Councillor Rombouts? No. Councillor Stark? Yes. Councillor Veen? No. Warden Weber?
No.
Councillor White? I have 17, so that fails.
Motion is defeated. Move on to bylaws. Item number 11. Ask the clerk to read the bylaws.
Thank you. It is moved by Councillor Stark, seconded by Councillor Rombouts, that bylaws 7 and 8 of 2020 as circulated be taken as read a first and second time.
Questions? All in favor? Opposed? That's carried.
As moved by Councillor Rombaut, seconded by Councillor Stark, that bylaws 7 and 8 of 2020 as circulated be taken as read a third and final time.
Any questions? Councillor Bradley.
The comment, I want to congratulate Councillor Mansour. He's the type of councillor I like.
All in favor of bylaw number 8? That's carried. So we've read the bylaws. Motion to adjourn. Honorary Councillor Nick Mansour will move the adjournment of the meeting. Seconded by Councillor Hand. All in favor? That's carried. We'll meet again on April the 1st. Oh, Canada.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true